When it comes to music that is licensed in media, there are essentially two different categories of music that ends up being licensed. These two categories can broadly be defined as artist music and production music. On one hand, there are artists who are making music they're inspired to write. They're often pursuing recording and performing careers. They're putting out CDs, they're touring, and so on. In other words, they're artists. Artists aren't necessarily thinking about licensing opportunities when they're writing and recording. They might be, but artists first and foremost are just trying to write great music. Any licensing opportunities are probably an afterthought. Artists aren't trying to write great songs for TV or films per se. They're just doing what they do. On the other hand, there are musicians who make what can generally be called production music. Production music tends to be instrumental and tends to be more generic. Think 80s rock guitar riff, 70s funk track, Delta blues, and so on. It's music that captures a specific genre or style of music. Production music is usually used more as background music. It's not typically featured prominently in productions, although there are exceptions. Musicians who are making production music and are actively licensing it probably are thinking a lot about licensing and what works and doesn't work within the context of music licensing. So these are two very different approaches to licensing, and which path you choose to follow really depends on your overall career goals. If you are pursuing a performing career and you want to establish yourself as an artist, then it probably doesn't make sense to try and speculate about what works for potential licensing opportunities and then writing music specifically for licensing. Of course, if you have the time, you can. These two approaches can overlap. You can do both. If you know you're not interested in putting out CDs and touring and you're just looking at licensing as a way to supplement your income, you're probably a better candidate for making quote-unquote production music. Most of the writers that I know who do well in this field tend to also have a background in music production, and they usually have their own recording gear. Production music and instrumental music in general tends to generate less money in both licensing fees and royalties because it's considered more background music. So writers who do well making and licensing production music generally have large catalogs of hundreds of songs or even more that together generate substantial revenue. Artist music tends to pay more and is usually featured more prominently in the productions it's being used in. When performing rights organizations determine how much to pay per placement, they factor in things like how the song is used, is it background or foreground, how long is the placement, are there vocals, and so on. The more prominent the placement, the larger the performance royalty will be. A 30-second instrumental background piece of music might generate as little as $50, whereas a 30-second song with vocals and featured prominently will generate somewhere in the range of $300 to $500, depending on when and where it's used.